ideas further in an after party. It is with great pleasure that I now introduce you to Shaianne Osterreich, who is Associate Professor of Economics at Ithaca College with research interests in international trade, poverty alleviation, and gender.
Thanks so much, Leah, and to everybody who is doing the work to get this together, and especially to Patty Zimmerman for the inspiration and the chat and ongoing enthusiasm through these rough years that we've been having. I want to introduce my co-conspirator in this event, Yasinta Ariesti. And Yasinta and I met a few years ago as she was working on her master's degree, but we had in common a community located in Jakarta that worked on union issues and labor politics, and we're both interested in research related to basically into labor. And you will see her full detailed bio in the chat, but just to orient us on this event, I want to start with the following. Also, as a sort of tribute to Patty Zimmerman, back in the spring of 2020, as COVID was sending us all to our own kitchens and living rooms, and the shutdown was beginning to happen all over the world, Patty and others were putting on this honors salon, and I was asked to come join a conversation about economics at the time. And so I, at that time, so it's like in April of 2020, I uncovered the following fact. Global buyers of textile and garments had canceled millions of contracts across the world because they could tell that their buyers in the United States and Europe and across the world were not going to be going to the mall or to Target anytime soon. And because of the power relations in the global value chains that create the products that we have and a lot of global consumers in general, those buyers were able to just call up those factories and say, we're canceling. And the impact of that was, at that time, the estimate was 200 million textile and garment workers were rendered immediately unemployed. That was the shape of the supply chain in that moment. Now, here we are 2 years later, and everybody is wondering, okay, let's get the supply chain back again. We're ready to go. And it turns out that it is just not that easy to restart that machine. So it is not that surprising that we see such an entangled supply chain that is causing problems for consumers in the West. It's causing problems for consumers in Asia. It's causing problems for workers, for dock workers, for manufacturing workers, for truck drivers. And one of the things that is driving some of the big problems, there are many drivers, but one of the issues has to do with the turn towards online retail. It's both a blessing for firms because people are in their homes and they're not going out into local or shopping malls or to small stores, but they can do a lot more, and they continue to do a lot more online retail shopping. So large retailers like Amazon, or in Indonesia, we have Tokopedia or Shopee, or in other parts of Asia, Alibaba. They are, in a way, creating this magic between consumers and producers, but perhaps it's a little too much magic. And the speed with which producers can make stuff and consumers can buy stuff are not really aligned. So with this is the general opening to our conversation. And I'm going to turn to Yasinta to ask, from your perspective, can you share some insights as to what COVID was like in Indonesia back in 2020 in terms of economic activity?
Okay. Hi everyone. Thank you for inviting me I'm about to say this morning, but anyway. So so yeah, Indonesia. Indonesia has been really has been severely affected by the COVID-19 crisis, of course. The lack of centralized and adequate government response is one of the things that has led to uncoordinated responses, as you said before, including a lockdown on Jakarta as a business capital, and others, perhaps like in mines and agriculture. But that's sounds like, but that's predictable. I find the fact that according to the Indonesian Logistic Association, that logistic company have experienced an approximately 50% to 60% decline in overall business performance since the COVID-19 outbreak hit 2 years back. And also it is reported that logistic volume has been down as well, of course, following the stopping of economics, the freezing of the economics in the across the country due to many things like emergency measures and everything. But again, like I said before, Shaianne business to consumer and C2C delivery services, of course, has experienced growth despite the outbreak, because it's related, right? I mean, when people cannot go outside to buy something, technology and that innovation like Tokopedia and things like that, of course, have their own opportunity. But again, the increase I think was too small. I mean, according to the data, again, the increase was too small to compensate for the sharp drop in the business to business segment. So the B2C and the C2C customer to customer segments recorded growth due to the increase in demands for some other, like some efforts for food and medical supply deliveries. Maybe I might add as well that telemedicine startup in here have a good experience as well while pandemic outbreak hit. So yeah, that's what's happening in overall.
Yeah, so just to unpack a little bit of what you were saying, we have part of the economic crisis that comes out of COVID is related to both consumers and their relationships with the companies that they're trying to buy stuff from, but also businesses trying to buy services and goods from other businesses. So the overwhelming majority of economic activity globally in manufacturing is actually this business to business kind of activity, because with widespread global value chains, supply chains, if you will, across the global economy, there's lots of moving parts. And all of those parts can get clogged up when you have, a persistent COVID outbreak in Vietnam, or a different type of transportation or distribution problem in Indonesia, and then the whole chain starts to fall apart. So the logistics of trying to keep all those intermediate goods and the final goods to get to the final consumer, they really take a big hit. There's just so much uncertainty.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like post COVID-19, maybe I don't know when, but as the industry, I think as the industry position itself for recovery and growth, of course, technology somehow will increasingly play a major role. As you said, it's like entangling everyone from the start to the end. So yeah, I believe technology will play a major role to enable all stakeholders back, like including, again, shipper, transporter, warehouses, owners, and vendors, everyone on the ground, to become more efficient in responding to changing market realities. So because we are changing, and we also kind of adjusting in this industry. Although logistics is the heart of domestic and international trade, again, yes, uncertainty remains a huge problem in Indonesia's supply chain. So, I mean, for context, Indonesia is an archipelagic country, right, with 17,000 islands. So it's quite confusing how to connect one island to another island, which means, you know, goods cannot be transported using only trucks on land alone. A multimodal system are very necessary in here. There's like land and sea transportation as well. So yeah, many stakeholder from different kind of logistic background are impacted. Yes, of course.
Yeah, and especially with shipping, I mean, Indonesia is actually a perfect environment to imagine the role of shipping.
Yeah.
Both in terms of international shipping to and from Indonesia as across Asia parts and coffee and palm oil and tin and all kinds of products are making their way, you know, to where they're supposed to go, and also across Indonesia. In the United States, we often are hearing stories, and there's a couple of very beautiful photo essay articles in the New York Times that are dealing with the clogging up the ports. So in the United States and in Europe, there's this and in Asia, there's a port problem where you've got not enough port containers in Asia to put stuff in because they're all blocked up in San Diego, in California, and they're waiting there for weeks. And so even this, you think to yourself, well, isn't this going to eventually get sorted out? And apparently the experts are saying it's taking a really long time for shipping to get itself sorted out. In fact,
that happened as well, of course. Causing increases waiting and turnaround time, you know, and also risk of the labor disputes. I mean, people are staying there on the ground, and I don't know, they should have paid for only one day, for example, but you stuck there for days, more than 1 day. So yeah, of course.
Yeah. So let's talk about labor a little bit. Here we know, for example, that there are certain industries, trucking is one of them, but not only, that are part of the distribution system where we're seeing labor shortages, and this is making it difficult for logistics to work their way through. What kind of labor shortages or issues are you seeing for the workers that are on the ground, the ones that don't get to do remote work? Like most of us here on this call get to turn to remote work when we want to, right? But the people who are actually on the ground doing the distribution, they don't get to do that. So what does that look like in Indonesia?
Well, about the shortage, I probably, this is like a thesis, master thesis question, Shaianne, but it's fine. I mean, on the ground, I agree. Yeah, people on the ground, they are the frontliner. They really need to on the ground and interact with others. You know, making sure operations on the ground from first and last mile, sorting houses, warehouses are working seamlessly, and you're right. People like with more strategy a more strategic position could work constantly in front of the computer with their Excels and GDocs, but not with them. But the problem would be that's not the problem yet. That's what happened, and that's what they need to do to make these operations working. But because you know what, as advanced as advanced the technology is in the world of logistics, I guess there still has to be someone, to do the operations on the ground. I mean, in more major companies like you said, Alibaba, what we have again, Amazon in the US. There's a full robotic system that completely automates, not only digitizing the entire end-to-end process, from receiving orders, picking, packing, and outbound packages. And there may be very minimum human roles there, and there's the futures, and that's the future as well, because the speed of delivery is very highly desired by our customer right now. But reaching that ideal combination of workers and technology, human support are still needed to running the technology. The system and the human as the user are still very needed, those combinations. But yeah, that's that. But I think that also might fall into kind of shortage in a way, because not everyone, people on the ground, able to use that kind of system. The workers are still needed to as a complementary of the system. That might that's what I see right now. And again, they are frontliner, and during this COVID, I think they are the one that very have getting that very high risk of COVID itself. That's why the protection of the people on the ground are very needed and necessary right now. And I think that's what all logistic company need to very taking care of it.
Yeah, I remember back in early part of the pandemic, reading a lot about the way that shipping companies were or were not taking care of all of the people that were involved in the shipping. And it was, pre-vaccine, so nobody had vaccines. And so nothing, it was like there were very little protections that you could offer these essential workers. And yeah, it's very difficult. And your company and the project of logistics experts are trying to help solve these problems. But what do you think for small businesses in Indonesia that are not able to access your company's services? How do you think that they're doing with their distribution?
Well, I think this is the thing. I think everyone, even small business, have the access. I mean, to this kind of digital environment of marketplace. People are connecting there. It's very easy to use. This kind of technology, this kind of e-commerce that we call like Tokopedia, like Shopee that we have in here. They're very easy to use, and it's free. Everyone can use it. But again, on the other side of the technology, there's a merchant, there's a small businesses that working on the ground, picking and packing, making the orders ready. If they had access to automation, to digitalization of the warehousing, that would be very sufficient for them, because they don't need to work on the ground, right? But this kind of services, maybe not everyone able to access, not everyone knowing this. So of course, as a small business, they have to think about that kind of operational work, operational cost that I'm sure require them to really on the ground, meeting people and things like that. But yeah, I'm not sure how they're going to, protect themselves if they don't have their own, willingness to protect themselves with vaccinated issue, things like that. Because again, it's issue in everywhere, right? People are not going to, not willing to get vaccine and everything.
Yeah, is there a big, are I'm sorry, I should know this, but is there a large population of people that are like scared of the vaccine and they don't want to get it?
Not really, actually, but I mean, at first, yes. The pros and cons about vaccine are everywhere in here, but somehow the government are making this kind of vaccination kind of mandatory if you want to working on the ground, if you want to travel, if you want to do stuff outside. Even if you want to enter the local store and something, it's mandatory to have the vaccine first. So yeah, they have no choice, and I think it's good. I think it's good for him. Yeah,
that's good. Well, especially for the essential workers working the supply chains.
Yeah,
I mean, and for everybody else, of course, but considering like so here in the United States, there are a couple of areas in particular that are causing trouble and generating inflation because of the supply chain problems. Some of those big areas include food and wood and lumber products, and that is contributing to problems in construction and contracting. Of course, oil and energy costs, but there's a lot of global reasons for that, and also it's a highly financialized commodity, which is also generating that kind of inflation. Are you in Indonesia? Are your companies that you work with or the other companies able to raise prices as a result of some of the difficulties, or are you not seeing that?
Actually, I'm not seeing that as well, because I mean, talking about the cost of the cost of the operations and the price of the sales, it's not surging enough. I mean, it's not that surge like what we think. I mean, due to COVID, yeah. Of course, several commodity has a surging prices, but I think the others like the others necessity basic commodity aren't seeing the kind of surge due to COVID. But again, it's happening. I mean, it's always happening here in Indonesia when we have Ramadan month here, right? Like one holy Ramadan when people are fasting, and we have Idul Fitri as well. That is when the prices are going to raise. Like for example, right now the oil are scarce. People cannot buying them, and it's very scarce in the market, and very high expensive as well.
The oil prices?
Yes, the oil prices. Cooking oil. Sorry, cooking oil.
Cooking oil. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. If you Google right now cooking oil in Indonesia, that's quite a national issue right now. Yeah. Again, it's just like a long community from end to end process. Why it's happening, right? So yeah, and it's not due to COVID because it's just happening, I'm sure.
But you don't think it has to do with like cross-country supply chain issues?
Of course, maybe. I mean, that might be one issue as well, but it's happening like a week before Ramadan as well.
Yeah.
So it's so many theories out there, and it's kind of common in here. Not common. I mean, a week or 2 weeks before Ramadan is always like that. If it's not cooking oil, it's an egg, or it's not an egg, it's a meat. There's always some certain commodity that the price, the things like happening to that kind of commodity before Ramadan.
Yeah. So just a final question before we have some Q&A from our audience. Do you think that the large retailers like for us, Amazon, or for you, Tokopedia, are they good for the business and the consumers on balance, or do they generate right now? Do they generate more problems for the businesses and the consumers?
So one thing that's very interesting happening in Indonesia with this e-commerce are like a few years back, we have the very first national online shopping day, or we call it Harbolnas. It's Hari Belanja Online Nasional in Bahasa Indonesia, but translate in National Online Shopping Day. It's happened. It happened every month during twin date, like 1/1, 2/2, 11/11 on November, 12/12 on December, things like that. Big e-commerce player like Shopee, Lazada, Zalora, Tokopedia, and also everyone. I mean, every player are contributing in this event. What's happening during this event is it's a great discount there, flash sales everywhere, and it's not only it's affecting everyone, like everyone would be like, merchants, small businesses, big businesses, payment gateway, because you need to pay after you buy things, not only small merchants, big brands, logistic distributions as well. I mean, on the distribution sides, they are the busiest part as well, because people are buying, right? So on the warehouse side, they have to pick and pack and outbounding the packages, and the in the shipping side, they're very busy in distributing, right? So yeah, I don't see it's as I mean, of course there's some drawbacks and opportunities, but again, if this kind of environment already sync, and people can buy, and people can buy with very cheap price, and everyone also busy, and that's kind of big day in Indonesia, because you could buy something very expensive and only at that day that's quite cheap. So I can say that's good for economics, right? That's the opportunities for economics. But again, I want to close as well this statement, because on the more automation and digitalizations wise, I mean, digitalization, like technology company like this, even where I work for as well, we try to digitize, and we try to digitize logistic rights, right? The point is, digitalizations bring complete transparency, across the entire supply chain, by achieving visibility at every stage of the product life cycle. So that the lead times can be reduced. Lower lead times means inventory cost and better use of the workforce as well. That means resources, and it's improved the quality of the product as well. But again, it will hurt the supply chain if again, it's the technology, right? If the user, as human, as the user, mismanage implementation, it's going to be, changing a supply chain management system takes financial investment, time, human resources, and if not implemented properly, well, there will be, again, wasted labor, service redundancy, and missed deadlines, that result in this significant cost. So again, it's up to the human. Again,
it's up to the human. Yeah. And also, I mean, I think what the fragility of the supply chain is real. So like we can have this like high tech, big data and analysis to create a sleek and fast and very responsive chain, but the power relations for the workers, the suppliers, the buyers, they can
it's not gonna,
and it kind of
is still there. It's going to still there.
And it kind of, and this is one of the things that COVID did, was it sort of like just like sliced up these supply chains, like with bits and pieces, and we see like uneven effects across different parts of the global economy, and even within our nations, like the ways in which we were very dependent upon these like very efficient supply chains, to the extent that a company can get themselves that efficient, but then you realize it's still kind of vulnerable.
Yeah, it is. Agree with you, Shaianne.
Yeah. So now we turn to questions. And so I'm looking at questions in the chat. Oh, yes. If you have a question, you can actually raise your hand and we can, maybe the producers can call on you.
I'm just going to jump in, Shaianne. There is a question. Do you see large buyers helping their suppliers in Indonesia implement automation? Sorry. Do you see large buyers helping their suppliers in Indonesia to implement automation?
Oh, I think it's not necessarily buyers and suppliers, but again, technical knowledge, technical know-how is very common practices in logistic industry. I mean, if you have partners, whoever it is, like, investors or just partners, technical partners, they will help this kind of thing.
Yeah, and I would say that there are certain types of supply chains where global buyers that are involved with foreign direct investment. So, for example, a large agribusiness sometimes has foreign direct investment in a certain community, and they will then, they will share or sell the technology precisely because it works out better for them. And then that can also be better for the local firm. So I don't think it's that common unless there is an actual economic relationship with those firms for buyers to share that kind of technology. But when they own part of the local supplier activity, they're more likely to. Yeah.
Go ahead, Richardson. If you would take off your, unmute yourself and ask your question.
For having me. Thank you for the presentation, Shaianne and Yasinta. I'm an Indonesian myself, but I'm based in the US. I'm curious, Indonesia has historically tried to achieve food self-sufficiency in staples like rice. Given the supply chain crisis and a situation like the Ukraine conflict that has raised fears about wheat supplies in Indonesia, is there any discussion on the policymaking level of bringing back, striving for self-sufficiency again, or even on the government side as they consider policymaking, are they investing more in these digitalization efforts in supporting the supply chain through technology? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Richardson. Hi. Yeah, of course, I noticed you're Indonesian. Well, I'm not sure, really. I'm not sure. I mean, we both can see, right, from the discussion on the news, on the internet, that might be not something that our government priority right now. But from the other side of the business, I think there's a lot of that kind of food supply chain startups, that trying to connect people, even from the farmer itself, from the farmer itself to the consumer. So they're trying to connecting them without the intermediaries in the middle. That would be very, very, very helpful to improve the efficiency of the supply chains, and that's happening a lot, I think, in here from the startup side. So yeah, from the government side, I mean, you must also kind of kind of know yourself from the media issue going on. But again, there's a lot of innovation that happening to help to increase the efficiency of this food supply chain as well, too, by direct selling to the consumer from the farmer side. That's what's happening.
Thank you.
Rachel?
Hi. Thank you for being here today. I enjoyed listening to this conversation. I just had a question for you, Yasinta, about your opinions or thoughts on kind of the sustainability of incorporating more digital in like the global value supply chains in Indonesia. Like, do you have any thoughts about this kind of direction that, or if you could elaborate more on your thoughts of this direction that we might be headed towards?
Okay, I think the very nice, very good impact that resulting from this kind of technological disruption by cutting intermediaries are the price itself, the price and the fairness of the distributor or the supplier. Conventionally, not logistics, supply chains it's a chain, it's a chain and it's long. But with this kind of technology innovations and disruptions, you're cutting off the long unnecessary chain, right? And somehow not increase. The price would be the same, I guess, but someone in the first the supplier side would have better prices or somehow more fair share of their own products. So my thought would be this kind of innovations that what needs to think of. What needs our government needs to think of, reducing the cost and giving more better share to the farmers or the first suppliers with technology or with everything, with policy, with anything that could matter.
Yeah, and I just want to follow up. Last year, in a globalization class that I taught, we did a case study on Mongolia and a government project to bring cell service to parts of Mongolia, rural agricultural parts of Mongolia, where there had not really been much there. There was sort of an occasional landline, but fundamentally most people didn't have access. And as a result of having access to quality communication, those farmers that were producing wool, from which we get amazing, gorgeous wool sweaters, those farmers were much better able to bargain for the right price because they knew what the right price was, instead of having to be dependent on a bunch of sort of shady intermediaries who are like, take it or leave it. And they're like, well, I got to sell you my wheat. I got to sell you my jewelry. I would need to sell you my cashmere wool. But now they know. So there's the digitization and the technology can actually make a real substantial improvement in the viability of a business in a way that that can make a big difference. And especially for, minoritized or women businesses who historically have a really hard time in small and medium-sized businesses. It can
agree, Shaianne. the real-time tracker, you know, and every visibility. Also, you can show the price upfront, you know, without shady fee in the final step. So that's kind of quite nice, actually.
Mhm. There are persistent issues, like here in the United States. One of the things that and not just here, but everywhere, that the COVID did was really put a spotlight on the digital divide between different communities, between rural communities and more urban communities, men and women, ethnic minorities, people with, you know, precarious citizenship status, etc. So these things are the same in Indonesia as they are in the United States, and that definitely has some effect on access to engaging in global commerce or domestic commerce, for sure. Just looking in the chat, Annie.
You know, Yasinta, you were talking about Ramadan and how that creates some scarcity, if you will, or higher prices. But of course, Ramadan comes every year and it's predictable.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so one kind of wonders about that. You know, for instance, in the US, we drink a lot of Coke and Pepsi in the summer because it's hot. Coke and Pepsi make extra soda in time for summer, and the price doesn't change, right? So, you know, you just wonder about why every Ramadan, you know, you're going to have to face these shortages unless there's something going on this year or right now that's unusual.
Well, what yeah, what you said, Annie, that's very makes sense. It's predictable. It's happened every year since a long time ago. But again, somehow we cannot manage the supply, you know. It's like I said before, if it's well, this year we have cooking oil. Last year we have eggs or meats or something that's very necessary for Ramadan festive, you know, because on during Ramadan we do a lot of cooking, right? It's just like a big holiday, but not holiday, I mean big event last a month. So actually I don't have the right answer to do the to answer, because that's what we thought as well. Why there's no sustainability every year? So yeah.
I might offer a reminder that in capitalism, companies will sneak in their profits wherever they find them. So we know that it does not cost Uber any more money to drive you when it is raining, and yet they will charge you a higher price because you need them. And similarly, in the summertime, Americans pay, even under normal conditions, we pay much higher prices in the summer when we go on long trips, because gas stations know we want to use the gas. So, I mean, there are fabricated appearances of scarcity on a regular basis in capitalism. And I think that does play a big role. And I will also say that there is a huge debate amongst economists right now about our so-called, there are various aspects of the global economy that is genuinely facing real price surges. In wheat, for example, right, coming out of the Ukraine-Russia situation, and also with respect to fuel. But even in the fuel situation, before the conflict started in the Ukraine, there were a lot of economists and finance experts who know perfectly well that people are engaging in financialization, highly financialized trading in order to maximize their returns on oil commodities. And also Home Depot had a record year of profits in the last 2 years, like in a row. So where price surges come from we also want to think about where do the profit surges come from?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the answer. I mean, that's like more, more hire someone hire who could manage this kind of thing,
Yeah. Yeah. Paris?
Hi, I was wondering if you guys could elaborate why you're using the term global value chains over supply chains, or if you wanted to go into that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll take it. So global supply chains, I think they're just the sort of nuts and bolts and the pragmatic connecting of each stage of the life cycle of a product from but particularly the emphasis is usually on like once we've made the product, then and we've gotten the ingredients, we've made the product, and then we get it and we ship it. It's also the case that along those supply chains, there are power relations embedded in the handover of the good from one person to the next. So personally, when I try to make meaning out of who is most vulnerable, who is most powerful along the supply chain, we often use this phrase global value chain in order to kind of capture that there's value and profits being made in certain parts of the chain that are different depending on essentially the status. So, and that is a global value chain is very similar to a local value chain. Like coffee producers, coffee farmers in Indonesia, in Bali, they make the smallest amount of money along the entire supply chain of coffee, if you will. They spend the most amount of time and they earn the smallest reward. So when we talk about global value chain, it can help remind us that it's global and that value is being created and rewarded at different places along that chain. So that's why I like to use it. It's not really instead of supply chain, but if you Google supply chains, you're going to get a kind of management-y thing. Whereas if we want to have like Yasinta is saying, you deal with your logistics, but we also can see through how logistics are both necessary and the people along those sort of wide array of logistics, some people are more vulnerable and some people are making a lot. So it's sort of a rhetorical difference.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I was interested in asking you all a question regarding quick trends. This I see a lot on social media, such as fast fashion. And I was hoping you all could elaborate a little bit more on that and how these spikes impact the global supply chain.
Yeah,
I would for you, Shaianne.
Yeah, I would say fast fashion is a perfect example of of issues in the global value chain. So you have fast fashion is I'm not even going to get the timing right because I'm too old, but it's 2 months. You come up with your fashion idea, you contact that company in Bangladesh, you tell them they have 3 days to come up with a good sample. They come up with the sample, and then you're like, okay, fine, give me 100,000 of those or 50,000 of those. And then the company does it, and then they sell it, and then that's it. That's your whole relationship with that company and that time. And that company will sit there and wait for you to call them again.
Yes.
So the fast fashion, it's really high pressure. It depends on really smart logistics experts. And it's really stressful and puts a lot of pressure on the producers. but
Yeah,
it
I think
allows the retailer to have new fashion every month. What do you think, Yasinta?
Yeah, thank you, Shaianne. I really like to add some point because again, Shaianne and I quite have similar background on labor researcher before I joined this logistics startup company, and my focus was also on this garment labor in Indonesia, and not only what happened in here, the garment for the worker for garment industry, they only have I just want to give you a context that kind of very quick contract that supplier gave to us, to the supplier, are impacting a lot of people. Can you imagine that? I don't know, 2,000 or 5,000 people worker under the company need to work on one or two style for one retailer, only one for this very short period of time, and then that's it. And again, yes, like following what Shaianne already said, after that they just need to another call, another orders, and that's it. And it's very, very uncertain, very vulnerable. But on the other side of the producer, this worker needs to work one time, and it's very, very quick, like one day for, I don't know, 10,000 items. That's quite crazy. That's quite crazy, quite sad, actually.
Yeah. And I will just say that using this as a great example is it makes it very difficult for the Indonesian factory to give that worker a good contract because they don't know about their next contract. So the Indonesian factory can only give you like very short, unpredictable contracts. Yeah. Hi, Kaylee.
Hi, I was just wondering if there is any sort of relation between these sort of supply chain issues and kind of the increase that we've seen in sort of labor strikes and greater union negotiations recently, and if you could speak to that.
Well, first I want to see Yasinta in Indonesia.
No, it's you.
No, well, in Indonesia, do you see labor shortages or workers having a little more bargaining power, or not really?
Not really, of course. Not really.
Yeah, well, first of all, tune in next Wednesday because I will be moderating another conversation called Strikes and Resignations. But I do think that there are certain pressure points in supply chains where people have had enough. And in the United States, as it relates to supply chains, I think trucking is one of those areas, despite the sort of weird, idiots who are doing the like vaccine protests or whatever. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about like real professional truck drivers are actually creating a large portion of the shortage, in part because they're kind of resisting and resigning that work because it is very difficult, onerous work. It's very they were not treated well during the early months of the period of the essential workers, and it's just really tough work. So I do think, especially in trucking in the United States. And I also think it's true at the ports. I think the port, in addition to other problems that ports in the United States and Europe are having related to congestion, they are also seeing labor shortages. And I think it's for the same reason, that it's hard to be safe and they're not making enough. And they have not been making enough for years. It's a labor market that hasn't been treated well for years. We have a couple more, maybe one more question before we have to close up, but there will be a kind of after party if we want to have some more formal conversation, but I'll take one more here. Liam?
Hi, thank you guys for talking with us tonight. And kind of similarly on the same lines, someone put in the chat earlier that there were 200 million workers that were unemployed due to the supply chains. So my question is, are there any incentives or ways people are trying to get more employees back into the industry?
That data point was to labor in related to textile and garments. And I would say that one of the problems that you see that we sort of hinted at is these global value chains, supply chains for textile and garments, for example, really depend upon cheap wages for women workers. And we know that the care economy collapsed and was a big highlight onto the deficits in our care economy, both in Indonesia and in the United States. And that has had a huge effect on being able to get women back into the labor market. And I do think that textile and garments continue to suffer a little bit from that, but in Asia, in areas where women don't have a lot of other economic activity to pursue that would be as beneficial to them, I don't think they need a lot of incentive. Their families need some help with respect to the care economy, but they don't have to get, it's not like in the United States where people are like, I can rest on some of the, that I can kind of resign and wait for like a better position. So if we think of the most vulnerable workers, I mean, the textile and garment sector is similarly vulnerable. So they've been presented with more challenges, but I don't think they need a huge wage increase to come back to work, because that was the work they had. That was like, they were waiting for it to reopen. Yeah, it's a good question.
Well, folks, I think we're out of time, but please stick around for the after party. Look in the chat. There's a PDF there that you can download if you want to capture all of the different links that we've assembled as this talk went along. If you don't get it tonight, you can get it on our webpage. And right now, please unmute yourselves and put on your cameras, and let's give a round of applause for our Indonesian in the crack of dawn and our Ithacans. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope to see you soon at another event.
Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.